Nabokov's Pale Fire is, among other things, a warning of the folly of attempting to do biographical criticism of a work of literary art. Kinbote is like says like Kinbote's position is I knew John Shade personally because I knew the person. I am the best person to explain this poem. And of course, this is absurd. Even if he were not delusional, he doesn't seem to have any particular insight. What he knows is mostly trivia that seems very separate from Shade's process. Shade is presented as distinctly different in his kind of personal, banal bourgeois life and in his kind of intense, gorgeous inner life. He knows very little. It's as if I said, "Hey, I had an apartment in grad school next to Natasha Trethewey, or back in grad school, Natasha Tretheway tried to set me up with one of her friends. Therefore, I can use that experience to explain native guard to you." That is ridiculous. That would be ridiculous. And as we know from our section on native guard, I don't think I would do that. So using autobiographical criticism can be extremely dangerous, but we do know that Nabokov is using some of the biographical facts of his life, of his lived experience, to help fuel and construct this novel, which is not autobiographical. I want to point out what he's doing, which is he's taking some biographical stuff and changing them. What is most interesting in biographical criticism is not how the life is reflected in the work, but when you can see the artist take the biographical material and do something to it, change it. That is the artist at work. Otherwise, you run into the naive idea that basically the life just gets onto the page somehow, as if the writing part didn't do anything. In fact, other people would say Nabokov's general life experience, so his life experience is peculiar, but people with similar life experiences don't write this book. Lots of people you can imagine with this life experience wouldn't write this book. Nabokov did it himself. Autobiographical biographical criticism can be a disrespect to the art. Okay, some banal things and some big things appear here. Nabokov is Nabokov is giving some of his biographical similarities both to Shade and to Kinbote. Like Kinbote, he is a refugee in the United States who worked at a university and who taught at universities while he lived in the United States. He was born a Russian aristocrat in 1899. He grew up in Tsarist Russia. He experienced the revolution against the Tsar before the Communist Revolution, the February Revolution, which I will come back to, before the October Revolution, the attendant civil war in Russia. He lived in exile through the 20s and 30s in Europe. He went to university Cambridge, England, not Cambridge, Massachusetts, and then lived as a refugee in Berlin and Paris, and had an extensive literary career as a Russian language author. The first half of his career, he's a novelist and poet in Russian, and then starting at 40, he switches to English as his primary literary language for output, which is extraordinary. So he is a displaced person. He comes and lives in America. He eventually settled down at Cornell in Ithaca, New York. So the descriptions in this book of a kind of college town in upstate New York, rural, the kind of northeastern hinterland, enormously detailed because Nabokov believes in the novel as meticulous description of the physical world around us, realism in that sense. He's going to use the environment he lived in for many years in Ithaca, New York. And actually, like Kinbote, Nabokov never owned a home after his exile from Russia. He he rented people's various homes. He was constantly at, I think, moving into colleagues' homes when they went away on sabbatical. And Mrs. Nabokov was apparently knew you were about to rent your house before you did moving in. So the idea of being a boarder in a house, that moment where Kinboat is like renting someone else's house while that person is on sabbatical and has new neighbors, is very much part of like Nabokov's experience. By the time he wrote this, he'd gotten rich and moved to Switzerland, where he lived in a hotel. Even when he had the money, he wouldn't buy a house. He lived in a hotel in Montreux, Switzerland, and remained American, kept his American citizenship, paid his American taxes, identified as American. Some things, the college environment described here, and is very much like the college environment Nabokov would have experienced in mid 20th century America. That includes the kind of weird joking about sex with undergraduates, that, which we see right from the forward, that was, alas, a kind of standard feature of American university life. The fact that professors are like sleeping with students and having affairs with students, and we do have this figure who's kind of marginalized, who like seems to be the female undergraduate with whom Shade is cheating on his wife. Um, that's based on that's not something Nabokov made up. That's something that he observed around him, and then he has the jokes about Kinboat's own homosexual lust after various students. This too is, I think, part of the observed environment. This was much more tolerated at that point than now. This would now be an investigation, etc., and rightly so. Don't be shocked. Nabokov is not making that up. That is what is happening in the world he sees. Nabokov and his family. Nabokov basically spends the 20th century being chased west by various authoritarian regimes, and losing family members to them along the way. I don't mean to make light of this. He loses family members to the czarists, to the Soviets, to the Soviet Communist Party, to the Red Army, to the Nazis. He has to flee Europe. He has to flee Europe because, I mean, he's actually married a Jew. Um, Unusually for a Russian aristocrat, his wife was ethnically Jewish, and therefore, under the Nazi blood laws, he would also have his son would also be counted as Jewish in years' time to go to America. That's, I mean, Nabokov lived in Berlin during the rise of Hitler, and despised him. One thing that Kinboat is not insane about, Kinboat may not be right about the politics, and he may badly misunderstand greatest Jacques Gray, whoever that figure is, but his contempt for those kind of totalitarian ideologues and the people who serve them is very real and very much part of Nabokov's worldview. He views authoritarians as failures, as jerks, as mediocrities, and in some ways he was in a world above them. I used to view this as merely a rhetorical position. I am above you, you're dirty little men, you're ants. I am not going to let you see me suffer. But if you actually look at authoritarian regimes, again, Nabokov has a point about the people who serve them and the people who lead them. Two particular family tragedies feature here. And one, the joking about Kinboat's homosexuality, I find odd, especially because Nabokov's next oldest brother, Sergei, died in the Nazi death camps for being a homosexual. He was homosexual. He was sent to a concentration camp. He died there during the war. Nabokov, in their teen years, did actually out Sergei. He read his journal and then showed the tutor something for which I believe he had a good deal of guilt. Here, Kinboat is not Sergei. He is not suffering in that way for his sexuality, and unlike Sergei, is unable. There's something about Kinboat's. It's not merely that he's homosexual. He is unable to form a relationship of any kind. That is something distinct. It is a matter for debate how much the commentary passages Kinbote's fantasy life about the king of Zembla makes space for a kind of queer joy, for the happiness of this character and his male romances. Most importantly, the central kind of plot event of the novel, the death, the murder, echoes Nabokov's father's assassination in many ways, in both perspectives. Nabokov's father was killed in 1922 by Tsarist fanatics in Berlin, by people who wanted to restore the monarchy. To put the Nabokov family in their exact political place, they are Russian liberals. They were opposed to the Tsars all along. Nabokov's father was always going to jail because he'd done something that made the Tsar angry and kind of sitting it out, coming back, and being in the Russian parliament. He is part of the Kerensky government, the first short-lived revolutionary government before the Soviets take over, kind of between the Tsars and Lenin. There's about 6 months of Kerensky. Nabokov's father is in that government. Then he's a kind of, center-right liberal exile in political exile in uh, in Berlin. One night he is hosting a political speech by a friend of his who's a member of another party further left. Tsarist assassins come to kill that man. Nabokov's father sees the gun, leaps into the crowd, and takes the gun away. And there were two gunmen. What Nabokov the son makes of this is a death that is simultaneously heroic and absurd. This is a man killed by fanatics in the service of their fanaticism, but also in a strange way, a heroic man killed by accident. Both Kinbote's reading of the death, this is a fanatic who has come to do a political assassination and gotten the wrong person, echoes that life history. The the non Kinbote reading, someone has come to kill the person from whom Kinbote is renting us, who's come to kill Judge Goldsworthy and then gotten the wrong man twice, is also consonant with this. This is this is one of the central events in Nabokov's life, and it is in the heart of this novel that doesn't feel like a kind of touchy-feely. It's not like a memoir at all. Um, Nabokov's memoir, Speak Memory, will not address this murder, will not address the assassination. For Nabokov, the raw meat, the bloody ugliness of his personal history is something to play with, to shape and reshape into a work of art. Not to make art mirror his life, but to take life and kind of shape it like a topiary into the position he wants to trim it into the confines of an artwork.